Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Let's Talk Movie podcast with me, John, and David, aka Shamrock Balls. And here on the channel in the past, we have discussed Alien, the 1979 classic directed by Ridley Scott. Well, that movie got a sequel. It was 1986's Aliens, not directed by Ridley Scott, but directed by Jim Cameron or James Cameron, whatever you want to call him. You know, the director of the greatest film of all time, The Terminator. But me and David happen to also be big fans of Aliens, and today that's what we're here to discuss. And David, tell us just your opening thoughts on Aliens.
But before I give my opening thoughts, John, I'm just wondering, how many episodes have we done together on this podcast so far?
It's got to be like close to 40, I think.
I think it's 38
Is it?
simulated. Yeah, that's strangely enough. I didn't even realize that, when I was putting the schedule together, this is number 38. And it just so happens that Gorman had done 38 simulated missions in Aliens. So there you go. Yeah, my thoughts on Aliens is my initial thoughts. There's again, this just ties in, as you said before, our wheelhouse of 1980s pop culture, 1980s movies, and this is another one again that I grew up always hearing about, was like Alien and Aliens. So I can't really remember the first time I seen it. I did watch it on television, and it was heavily edited. So I don't think I seen the original cut until I bought the VHS box set in the late 90s. I have a lovely box set, Aliens, Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection. And near certain it was only the special edition that was on that. So I'd say this is definitely one of those movies that was a big staple of the 80s. And it's been hailed as one of the greatest sequels of all time. Now, originally, I used to think that this movie was better than the original, but in recent times, my thoughts have changed on that.
Yeah, I used to also think that Aliens was better than the original. It's very similar to Terminator and Terminator 2 situation, which is funny because they both involve James Cameron. But as I've gotten older, I appreciate what Alien does more, the slower pacing, the much more of a horror film. I think it's a little bit more atmospheric. Not that Aliens isn't atmospheric, but I think it's just the score blends much better with how the film is trying to move along. I think it just works better. Sigourney Weaver's great in both of them, but I
Mhm.
just prefer the pacing of the original Alien and, these, the crew, like, yeah, they tried to replicate the crew, but the pacing of the original and Aliens are just I feel like they're night and day differences, and I just prefer now as an adult the Alien pacing more than the Aliens pacing.
Yeah, do you know, I actually said that there. I remember actually the first time watching Alien and having that and recording that off of television, and really enjoying that movie. But enjoying Aliens more, and it is because of the more kind of like action orientated type of movie that Aliens is. I think it appeals more to a more immature audience. If that makes sense. And it's not to say that anybody that likes Aliens is immature. I love Aliens, right? It's one of the greatest sequels of all time. It's one of my favorite films. What I'm saying is that when you're younger, I think Aliens appeals more to you. It's only, I think, when you get older, you appreciate Alien more for the reasons that you say there.
Yeah, you start to appreciate and understand like it's an allegory for, like just the working slobs, like, they're just there to do a job. Like in this movie becomes more of a military movie. Like the military's not involved in the first one. They're all just regular people, even Sigourney Weaver. She's there to assist them now. What's supposed to be like a different kind of mission. That's why they have the Space Marines, whereas in the first one, that they're all just there doing a job. They're not prepared for what's coming towards them.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely a different take on the original movie. And well, obviously, I'll get into my thoughts on that as we go through the film about my thoughts on the kind of the story and the structure of Aliens. A lot of people believe it's a completely different movie in a lot of ways. It borrows heavily from the original, and it's that, in my opinion. But it's the fact that the first one is a horror movie and the second one's more of an action thriller. So you know what I mean? That I think that people look over the immense similarities to the movie. And I'm actually saying that unfortunately in a negative way, not in a positive way, because people are saying, well, of course it's a sequel. There is similarities there, but there's a lot more similarities, I think, when you look at it than what people realize.
I think it's exactly very similar to a Terminator 2 situation there too, where Terminator 2 is structured very similarly to Terminator, but it's kind of the pacing is very similar, but still does the pacing is very different. I mean, but they do still hit the similar story beats to get to the same point almost.
Yep, exactly. Look, the thing about Terminator 2, in my opinion, is, and I think it has been documented in certain areas, in certain quarters, is that Terminator 2 is just an expensive remake of the Terminator, because the Terminator 2 was the movie that James Cameron actually originally wanted to make, and he couldn't do it because of financial restraints and technology restraints. So that's probably the reason why the same story beats are hit in Terminator 2, the same as Terminator. But the thing is about time travel, it's funny in time travel movies, you can kind of get away with that. You know, talk about paradoxes and things like that. It's fun. Those wee Easter eggs, we see it in Back to the Future. You see it in Terminator 2. But whereas this is, look, I give this movie absolute props for progressing the story of Aliens. It really does. It progresses the story. It expands the lore. There was a lot of fans that didn't like the fact that it expanded on the lore. They thought it kind of deviated too much from the original concept from Alien. But it really does expand the lore. And as far as sequels go, that's why it's one of the greatest sequels of all time, is because it wasn't like a lot of sequels that were coming out in the 80s, John, where they were just regurgitating the same story again, and the audiences was coming back for more. This was basically giving the audience some of the same, and it was kind of giving them more than the same. But I do believe that there's an awful lot in this which was taken from Alien.
I think I could see that too, and I completely agree. And we should probably get into like why this movie was even made and why it was made without Ridley Scott, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the conception of the movie basically was that I think it was one of the producers. I didn't catch his name because I watched the making of. He was on at Fox for years about making a sequel, and they didn't seem to be interested.
Which is insane because of the world we live in now.
Yeah, which is even insane when you think about, like, for example, you know, in the late 70s when you did have big blockbuster movies and they couldn't wait to make sequels to them because they were money spinners. So I don't understand why they weren't interested in making a sequel. Maybe if they, which is hard to believe, maybe they thought Alien was a one and done deal. They didn't want to mess with it, you know, because there was this idea that a sequel cheapens the original. And we weren't in the world yet of franchises, really. But this producer who worked for Fox was given the script by the script of the Terminator to read, and he read the Terminator, and he thought to himself, if there's someone who's going to write a sequel to Alien, it's this guy here, Jim Cameron, and he offered Jim Cameron the job to write Aliens. And it was really fortunate because at that particular time, as you may well know, John, it was in between a break. Jim Cameron was working on the pre-production of the Terminator, and they actually had to delay production because Arnold Schwarzenegger was contracted to make a sequel to Conan the Barbarian.
Conan the Destroyer.
Conan the Destroyer. So he basically had all this free time to sit and write Aliens, and he had written like 90 pages when they started filming Terminator, and Fox actually read it, and they were gonna start pre-production on Aliens in around that time. But after they read Jim Cameron's 90 pages, they went back to James Cameron and they said to him, listen, we're going to wait till you're finished the Terminator to finish this script. And if the Terminator is any good, we're going to let you direct it as well. Because I think he initially wanted to direct it, but they weren't going to let him because the only thing he'd really directed up until then was Piranha 2.
Yeah, and he came from the Roger Corman school of, making films. And he was a set designer there. So, like, he was really, his career progression is so fast. And this is actually what I wanted to talk to you about because he is so laser focused on, and like everyone says he's a control freak, and whatever his vision is, he wants everyone around him to execute that vision. And he's married at this time to the producer, Gale Anne Hurd, who co-wrote the Terminator with him, who's also like very business oriented. And we talk a lot about these auteurs here on the channel, and we've talked about plenty of them in the past who are like, really want to get their movies made. Whereas Jim Cameron, like, he wants to get his movie made, but he wants to get it made efficiently, on budget, on time, and he wants to prove himself because he's almost wants to move off this and move on to the next thing. And that really makes sense when you look at his entire career because like he only made like not even 10 movies throughout his entire career. So
Hmm.
it's like he's always had like this vision of himself, and like this is just a part of a bigger vision for him. And it just feels like the way he talks and the way Gillian Hurd talks about like working with this person, like everyone's just a chess piece in their vision.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, well, the thing is that when I've studied film over the years, there's a lot of these directors or auteurs, as you call them, artists. That's what they see themselves as, and they have a vision. And some of these directors, they won't let anybody get in the way of their vision, which is fair enough. But there's also a collaborative side to filmmaking because you've got to put your faith in the actors you've hired. You got to put your faith in the man that's writing the script. You've also got to put your faith in all the other artists that are there to do a job. So sometimes I think there's a fine line there. There's a balance, and you've got to get that balance right, and you have to have a bit of trust. And obviously, James Cameron was coming off. He'd been fired on Piranha 2. He had directed Terminator, the original Terminator, and I never really heard anybody have problems with him on that movie other than he had a vision and you had to do what he asked, or he wasn't very happy about it. I mean, we even heard stories of Arnold Schwarzenegger, of him coming up against Arnold Schwarzenegger about how Arnie should talk.
Yeah.
In one scene about "I'll be back," Arnold was taking English lessons at the time, and he was saying that James Cameron should not be "I will be back," and in the end, James Cameron had to say to him, "You're the actor and the writer. Read what it says in the page," and that became one of the biggest catchphrases of all time in movies. But so I don't know whether or not James Cameron was able to say stamp his authority on to the Terminator and get away with it because he had written it. It was such a small movie. It was almost like a guerrilla filmmaking type of picture. This was different. This was a bigger movie with a far bigger budget, with an established crew. And the feeling that I got was that he was very demanding, and there seemed to be kind of a bit of a culture barrier there, whereas James Cameron was kind of, as you say, professional, eye on the ball. We're here to make a film. We work 12 hours, 14 hours to get it done. You do it my way. And the British crew weren't used to that. They had a lot of them had previously worked under Ridley Scott, and I think that once they seen this guy coming in with that kind of, would you say, attitude, apparently the feeling was that they were a bit resentful towards him because he wasn't Ridley Scott and because it was a sequel. And I think then that's where the problem started. I did see an interview with a guy there who he sounded like a union guy, who actually said that there was concerns about the health and safety aspect of the making of the movie. So it sounds to me like the unions got involved to make sure that the crew wasn't working longer hours than what they should have been, and was taking their breaks when they should have been, because obviously there's employment laws probably there that have to be abided by.
Yeah, I think that's where he had a hard time. And one thing I saw on a different documentary was because he comes from the the Roger Corman school of like basically filmmaking, and you maximize your time, and that's how you come in under budget, 7 days a week, 14 hours. When he made the Terminator, he made that in the United States, guerrilla filmmaking, so maybe less union employees. Now, when he goes to Pinewood, I find this really interesting, actually, that at Pinewood, they come with the crew, they come with the assistant director and everything. So you essentially, they're allowing you to film on their property, and you got to almost abide by their union rules of like how
Mm-hmm.
to film there, how to like this crew works here. They're essentially letting you in, but even though he was willing at one point to like overrule that and fire them, but obviously that wouldn't work out. But it's just he didn't blend well with those unionized tea breaks that they had because he wanted to keep going. And I can see it both ways. I've worked actually in both environments myself, and I understand it from the it's almost any job with the union management versus the employees where like the management's not unionized. They want to just they're getting paid a certain amount of money. They want to finish on time. Whereas they're getting paid by the hour. That's our break time. We're gonna take a break.
Yeah, exactly. And do you know what? Listen, it's like a range on. I just think to myself that because of there was friction there, that the crew wasn't going to bend over backwards for him then.
No, they weren't. And would you? Like I've been in that I've been on like I said, I've been on both sides and I've been on the side of like, well, fuck this guy. Like, he's coming
Yeah.
into our place and he's gonna make us work more than what we're used to working because it's beneficial to him. How does that
Mhm.
benefit me? Like when he leaves, I'm still here. I'm not gonna rush for that.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think it was just obviously a clash of personalities, and we know James Cameron's reputation, and he wasn't going to back down because he's like, "It's my movie, you do it my way," but not understanding that he's in a foreign country where there is rules and regulations. And I know at one stage they actually brought the crew in and actually threatened them that they were going to shut the production down and go somewhere else, and apparently the crew all just laughed. But look, there was things like, for example, the first DP, Colin Jeanette Bernstein, Love all the time, and Darling, and things like that. Now, listen, that DP probably didn't realize what he was doing. It was probably just in his nature or the community he's from to do that. But maybe not realizing that look, you are in a place of work as well, and you shouldn't maybe be doing that. And I know that Jeanette Bernstein did talk about that. She said like he kept calling. I had to actually say him, you stop calling me, not your love type of thing. Even Lance Henriksen, the same guy, put his hand on his chest like that, pushed him back, and Lance Henriksen had to say to him, "Don't touch me." You know what I mean? So when you get an aggro like that, and there's rules and regulations, these guys aren't gonna. They're probably intentionally, in a way, going slowly and dragging their feet. And of course, that put an awful lot of stress and pressure on Cameron during this production. But one story which I actually had to laugh at was the fact that they used to put £5 in once a week and do a raffle. and one of the guys went up to James Cameron and says, "Do you want to put money in for the raffle this week?" So they all put £5 in a bucket for a raffle, and they'd put a name out, and somebody would win £300, £400. It was a lot of money back in the mid-80s. Anyway, so they went to James Cameron this particular Friday and went, "Do you want to put money in?" And apparently James Cameron just sat and stared at them, as if he was going to kill him.
He does have that look about him. And it's funny how these guys actually over there, like, they're doing like the same thing that he thinks they're doing to them. He's like, he just ropes them in with everyone, like, oh, they're fucking Americans. And it's funny because James Cameron's Canadian. He's not even American.
Yeah, right enough. Yeah, true. There was it was really funny as well. There was one of the special effects guys that were talking about doing one of the scenes in the movie. It's when is it Hicks puts the shotgun in the alien's head and blows the head off, and they says they spent all night doing the special effect. It was a Sunday night, and they spent all night doing it. And it says Jim the next day brought them in to show them the dailies, to show them how good a job they went. And one of the special effects guys joked around and went, "Oh, thanks very much, Jim. That looks great. I'm going to work on next Sunday night as well to help you out." So even they were like going, "Jesus, give us a break here." But I think he was just under pressure, mate, to try and get this film. Apparently, they were on a very tight deadline, very tight schedule, just to try and get the film all pulled together and filmed, edited, scored, and everything. Because as you know, when movies are actually announced to be released, the studio books it in with a release date with the theaters all around the country, and they can't move the date.
No, it's not that simple. You can't just delay a movie. That date is booked. Everything is like, I think people don't understand that when it comes, especially with a studio film. They book the time with the studio where they're going to be filming. You got to have all these people scheduled, and you have to be able to film within these windows because we're not going to just use the same sets over and over again. Some films do, but bigger movies, no. Like they got to move off that set and on to the next one. And that's where an assistant director really helps out too, a cinematographer lighting everything. So having everything moving along like it's a real job. I don't think people realize it's technically a real job. It's not just the people you see on screen. Like there's other people working around you, making sure that everything is done efficiently. That's kind of what the producer's job is.
Yeah, well, you have carpenters and you have electricians and you have special effects people and then you've got the actors, and you've the director, and as you say, you've got cinematographer. And the thing I found fascinating about this was the original cinematographer that they had on the movie. Actually, they did fire him because he was telling James Cameron how delete the scene, and James Cameron said, "No, that's not the way I want it to look." And in the end, they went to the producer, and the producer says, "Well, if he's not doing what what you're asking him, and if he's because apparently they asked him to delete it a certain way, and he says, I don't know if I can do it on time or on schedule." And they told the producer, and the producer says, "Well, if he's telling you that he can't do it on schedule, then that means he's unwilling to try and do it on schedule. So you need to get rid of him." And they then actually they get fired him, and they brought in another DP, or sorry, a director of photography, who had worked on Ridley Scott's commercials in England, and apparently him and Cameron got on really well, and he done a great job. But I thought it's funny as well, Jim. Jim, you're not Jim. It's funny as well, John.
I wish.
Call you Jim Cameron now. I wish I had his money. But it's funny as well, John, that it's funny that they had the same problem then with James Horner, because James Horner flew into England, to score the movie, and he was under the impression he had 6 weeks to score the movie. He was under the impression that when he arrived, the movie would be finished and edited, and he would come in and score it, and place it and score it, or spot it. I think they call it spot it and score it. And when he got there, they were still filming. And he was like, "What's going on here?" So he says his schedule, he had a schedule, he had 6 weeks, so it had taken a few weeks off his schedule. And then, of course, when it got to the stage where he started scoring it, James Cameron kept re-editing the movie. So every time he went to put the music, it was a different edit. And then he says James Cameron was then telling him, "Well, can you not do this? And can you not do that?" And he was saying, like, and he also said about Gail Ann Hurd as well. She was the same. So in the end, he was basically like saying to them, like, "Look, every day I come in here, you've re-edited the movie, and I've scored it for the way you done it yesterday." And they tried that with him. They says, "Well, if you can't do it, we'll get somebody else that can." And he actually called their bluff and said, "Well, if you do, let me know who it is, because maybe they could teach me a thing or two." And they didn't sack him. They didn't get rid of him. I think they realized they needed him, to score the movie. And it's a brilliant score.
It is a brilliant score. I don't think it's as good as the Jerry Goldstein score, the original, but it fits Aliens very well.
Yeah, no, listen, I totally agree with you, because see, when I was watching this movie the other night again, we watch it more with a critical eye. I love the score, but listen to it again, I was like, you know what? I really prefer Alien over Aliens, the score, because I feel like the Alien score subtly complements the original movie more. It's more about mood and atmosphere, whereas this one here, it's more kind of it's more like your traditional classic Hollywood score, more action packed, more adrenaline pumping, and I like that. But the quieter moments, I prefer Alien.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. With the original score we talked about in our original review of that was how that creates so much atmosphere, and it's kind of lying underneath everything. It wasn't like your original, like Jerry Goldsmith. I keep saying the wrong name. The way they did it in the original one was like he didn't feel comfortable doing that score at their time, because it was something that was more subtle than what he was used to doing, but it fit that movie very well. And I think this score fits this movie very well, because James Horner, what he was doing was what you would think of a regular movie of the time of the 1980s would kind of be. I feel like that's one thing with James Cameron, is like, as good of a director as he is, he's like almost like a B+ writer. And this movie kind of, you can see, it's like a template for what a lot of action movies would kind of start to try and copy, is like things going forward. Like the Michael Bays of the world would make like a junk version of this. Now
that I'm older, and I know it was a different time in the 80s and 90s. Like, these movies are classed as action movies. And it's the same with Terminator 2. I find that the action I don't think there's as much action in these movies as people remember. They maybe just remember the action scenes. There's an awful lot of time that the character and drama and story in between the action scenes that happen in the movie. I mean, what do you think about it? There's an action scene. The first real action scene of the movie. It must be about an hour in, and we don't get another one until the finale. But once that action starts in the finale, it doesn't end. It goes on for about 20-25 minutes.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I guess now we could start getting into the film itself, right? So, like you were saying, the first action scene's not for like an hour in. The movie does start very subtly, actually. It's paced, but yet it still moves along very quick because this movie's pretty long, but it doesn't feel long.
Yeah.
I think James Cameron just knows how to pace a movie very well. Like you were saying, there is a director's cut of this, but James Cameron, the movie kept getting edited and re-edited to have it come out perfect, and I think they actually nailed it. I think we get all the information we need. But the way they open the movie, it feels very much like the original Alien, but we get to see the very familiar James Cameron blue tint, which is very different from the original Alien movie.
Yeah, right away. As I say, I love how that it's very kind of similar to the first movie in a sense that you see the font come in. It's a different style of font, but the way it kind of just appears. Do you remember in the first movie where it just kind of like builds the A and the L and IEN, it builds, whereas this one here, it's like blue lights coming through, and then it pans down, and you can just see kind of space. Yeah, I don't know what you would call that, like some kind of Milky Way, but I love how beautiful that looks, that shot of actual space there. And then of course you see I'm not sure what you call that, but that spaceship shuttle that she get into in the first movie, but then you see that drifting along in the vacuum of space, and that's when the salvage crew comes in to the wee space shuttle that she's in, which it always reminds me of the start of Titanic.
It is very familiar to that, which is very funny as well.
It is, and of course they find Sigourney Weaver Ripley lying with Jonesy the cat in her pod, exactly where the first movie ended. But of course, we're 57 years later.
Yeah, that's the first big hammer that they drop on us. That it's been 57 years, and that's a hard thing to hear, and she doesn't handle it very well, of course. And she's also, for her, she just actually had this happen. This is one thing I also think that's very attention to detail and having that PTSD storyline in there. Like, it doesn't feel like 57 years to her. So this amount of time, this whole thing that just happened, everyone dying around her, this just happened recently, and now she's got to deal with that, and she's got to deal with the Wayland Company and their like the boardroom meeting right early in the movie, how they're getting on her, like, you destroyed some expensive equipment, and like, are you kidding me?
But not only that, John, do you imagine, like, say this happened to you, say you were working away somewhere and heaven forbid all your workmates died, right? And then you didn't come back for 57 years, but you didn't age, right? But when you get back home, sure, everybody you know is going to be dead. Like, your family, most of your family's going to be dead. Your friends are going to be dead. And it's not only that, it's the devastation of coming back and to nothing. She's come back to absolutely nothing, and then had to have her company then blame her for what happened and not believe her. But one advancement they did have 57 years later, even though Alien is set in the future, or even further in the future now, one advancement I did like was the futuristic suits, where basically all they did was have their collars up. Did you notice that? They have their suits on, but the collars are all just flipped up.
Well, that's one thing that's funny about Alien and then to Aliens. Alien still feels like the 1970s, and then Aliens still feels like the 1980s, like in the future. Like the boardroom still looks like,
yes,
like a 1980s boardroom full of yuppies and yuppie suits. Like, they even got, what's his name? James Remar? What's his name? Jesse Ramar? I always forget the guy's name. The guy who plays, who eventually becomes the antagonist of the movie. Paul
Reiser, yeah.
Just a perfect yuppie douchebag.
He's like Alexander Knox's long lost brother.
Oh yeah, definitely.
He's Alexander Knox's brother, but yeah, he's there as well. And in the meeting they're having, I noticed there was Rosa Klebb sitting at the desk as well, from Russia with Love. But what was I going to say about it? Yes, but I do actually like the fact that I only noticed this the other night. I've never noticed it before. At the start of the movie, Sigourney, because you always think of Sigourney Weaver in Aliens with a short haircut, which she does have for the majority of the movie, but she's got the long haircut at the start, which she had at the end of the 79 movie. So I thought that was nice that they kept that continuity there, that this is a continuation, this is the same person. And one thing I don't actually like about the opening of the movie is the dream sequence.
Yes, I don't like that either. And I know why they did it, but I don't like that either. That's something I would personally cut. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, but here, why do you think that that's?
Well, I think it's just because of what you were saying earlier. I think it's to have some sort of action in the movie when it's been moving at a slower pace.
Yeah, that's what I think. Because look, this is another nitpick of mine. I hate to bring it up, but in Siskel and Ebert's Jaws: The Revenge review, they which
It
they
had to happen. Jaws had to come up at some point.
has to come up. Listen, I have to mention it at some stage. You know what I mean? Anyway, so no, but they said that there's dream sequences in Jaws: The Revenge, and they singled that out as one of their pet hates. Movies should never do that. It's cheap when they do that. And I thought, well, Jesus, just give Aliens, I think, a positive review like a year earlier, and nobody ever mentioned about the cheap dream sequence at the start. But however, I don't like it because I don't know. I just don't like it. I don't mind when she turns around and grabs like that when Paul Reiser's talking to her and she feels as if something's inside her. I just feel as if it should have faded into the next scene where she wakes up in bed and she has the nightmare. I mean, for waking up like that at night, jumping out of bed, that's enough, in my opinion, to tell the audience that she's having nightmares. I don't think we needed to see it. But I agree with you. As the movie went on, I reflected and went, oh, you know what? They have that in there because first, I think they kind of fool the audience a bit to thinking that she's infected with an alien or impregnated with an alien, but also just to give us a wee bit of action at the start because there's very little goes on at the very start apart from exposition and set up the story.
Yeah, the movie really doesn't even. And then honestly, they have to get them on a mission, get her out there on a mission. So they have to spend some time convincing her to go back to work. And then the movie really starts to pick up when we get introduced to the Space Marines because that's what she's going to be doing. She's going to be assisting them, to which she believes to be eliminating the possibility of these aliens ever coming to exist again because, they ruined her life. So if there's more of them out there, she's like, okay, I'm on board if this is what we're doing. But of course, she should be smarter than that by now. Know what a corporation would do.
Well, I actually think I agree. That's part of the reason. The main reason is that she gets the promise of being reinstated as a flight officer again, which is her profession. She's living in this squalor. She's living in a small apartment with Jonesy the cat, and it's kind of like she's having these nightmares, and then she's presented with this opportunity to confront these aliens, this time with Space Marines, that they're going to wipe them out. And that's therapy for her because it's mentioned at the start. Paul Reiser saying about, I've seen your psych report, which why is he allowed to see that? And so you should know he's sleazy from the start looking in their records. But so there's an awful lot there for her to kind of confront and get over if she's going to move on with her life. I don't think it's only just about wiping them out, but it's only part of it. I love how she phones like Paul Reiser in the middle of the night,
I know.
And
he wakes up right in the middle of the night, like he's got no shirt on, ready to like talk to her.
Yeah, and then when she's like, when she asks him the question, did you not see him? I noticed this not well. He looks behind himself like that, and then starts talking to her. Who else is there? Wonder if he have a woman in there.
He probably did. I mean, he's a bachelor. It looks like.
Yeah. There's this woman phoning him in the middle of the night.
I got to be careful here.
Yeah, but Jesse, they meet the Marines. Did you notice the Sulaco? It actually looks like one of the pulse rifles. It's designed like one of the rifles.
I never did notice that, but you're right.
Yeah, so it looks like watch that. It's like one of the pulse rifles just going through space.
I mean, that's interesting. That makes a lot of sense. Like, why not reuse something like that? They take inspirations from everywhere. That's one thing when you find out about the production designs of these movies. Like when they're talking about when they first land on the planet, like the rocks in the background, that was a big thing for James Cameron, was making sure those rocks looked a certain way. And I love that. I mean, it always circles back to something we talk about, but set design like that, it's a lost art. Not many people are going to do that's just going to get created in a computer by, I don't know, some intern somewhere. Whereas this was the director made sure that it looked the way he wanted. Yeah, they also use a matte painting in the background, but still, it looks great.
Yeah, of course. And listen, that's one thing that even though we were talking about the crew that worked on the movie, one thing you can't deny is the artistry of the film. And look, I know that some of the cast did say that they couldn't knock their craftsmanship in the movie, and I heard they worked on their craft. It was just it was only at certain hours of the day. It wasn't just what they deemed a full day. And of course, you also then have Stan Winston coming in, who worked on the Terminator to create the aliens and the facehuggers and the Alien Queen. Which, to me, Stan Winston. I know that Dick Miller, who recommended Stan Winston, Dick Miller. I was a Dick Smith. No, Dick Miller is Dick Miller. I'm getting mixed up. Dick Miller's Mr. Futterman, isn't it?
Yeah, he's the actor who's in the.
He's the actor. Yeah. Dick Smith. There was an artist called Dick Smith. I think I mentioned him once in our Exorcist episode. He was classed as the greatest ever, or one of the best makeup artists in Hollywood and around that time. And Cameron wanted him for the Terminator, and he actually said, "Let's have another guy here who would be better for you." His name's Stan Winston. So they worked on the Terminator together, and of course James Cameron then got him to work on Aliens. And we all know now that Stan Winston, for me, is probably the greatest special effects artist. You could probably say in Hollywood now, because they've moved into CGI and things like that. The stuff that Stan Winston was doing in the 90s and the 80s, it's not really being done anymore. I think his pinnacle for me was Jurassic Park, and the T-Rex he created for that is mind blowing.
It's incredible. That's like the perfect blend, and that's why Jurassic Park holds up so well. Actually, Jurassic Park mug right here. The reason why that holds up so well is because it's a combination. They're not reliant on the CGI. They're just using both tools and marrying them, and it comes out perfect. Whereas, now it's like, well, we'll just CGI everything, and we won't give the actors anything to interact with, and the movie will feel lifeless.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that James Cameron does so well, in my opinion, in his movies. Terminator, Aliens, The Abyss, Titanic, all those movies he made, 80s and 90s, because he did come from an artist background, he understood the medium, and he understood using techniques of miniatures and full-size puppets, and as you said there about matte paintings, rear projection, using cameras like rewinding cameras as well, doing reverse photography, things like that, mixing the medium to create an effect or to create a scene. And I think Hitchcock was very good at that as well. For example, one thing I noticed when watching the movie, not to go too far ahead, but how he shoots the aliens in this movie. They're very quick cuts. Everything's backlit. They're mainly kept in the shadows and the smoke, and he cuts things very, very quickly. He never lingers on the alien too long. You know what I mean? That's something which Spielberg learned on Jaws as well. Again, the mention Jaws is just because sometimes these puppets, when they're seen out in the open in the bright light or natural light, they can look so fake, especially with people in suits and the way they move. You can tell that's a man or whatever in a suit. But if you can kind of light it properly, which is the reason why the DP gets sacked, if you can light it properly and you can use the tools at your disposal, like editing and things like that, you can get something that's very visceral, very, very, and in a lot of ways unnatural, and that kind of keeps the audience on the edge of their seat. It keeps them very unnerved.
No, I completely agree, and that all is a big part of this. And it's very similar to the original Alien in the sense that they kept the original Alien hidden, even though it's just one xenomorph in that. And this one, obviously, that was the big deal. We're having more of them, but you keep them still hidden because you don't want to give everyone you don't want to be able to see everything. You still want it to be dark. You still want it to be scary. You still want it to feel very claustrophobic, which, James Cameron understood that about the original Alien, and he's able to carry that over to this one. Obviously we start outside and we're on a planet, but even that planet feels very like small and just dirty and just disgusting, like the worst place to be.
Yeah, this is I think this is the first movie where the name Xenomorph was first used.
Oh, really? Well, that would make sense.
Yeah, they never used it in the first movie.
They wouldn't know what it was.
No, they wouldn't. And of course, as you say, there is they mentioned about Bishop as well, that he's from Hyperdyne Systems.
It's the sister company to Cyberdyne.
Cyberdyne. So there's that tie in the Terminator that James Cameron has as well. But yeah, they go into the planet, so they do, and as I say, the place is actually empty. Everything is all the people are gone.
Now, before we go there, the car that they drive in there that Ripley ends up driving a little bit later, it's very blocky. Does that look like a Batmobile to you? Like from the Batman the Animated Series?
Oh well, now you mention it, I can see where you're coming from with the Batman the animated series. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
How blocky and long it is. It's very unique looking.
yeah. Well, apparently that was made out of it was a vehicle airplane, a vehicle that towed airplanes.
I guess you
Yeah,
would need something for that.
yeah. That's what it is. It's like an airplane type of it tows the airplanes in the airport, so it does, and they actually built the metal shell around it.
Huh. Interesting.
That's why it has those big, massive wheels. I think
Yeah,
the original one it just has like two big front windows in the front. You know what I mean? And then they built around that.
yeah, those wheels are always so crazy. I thought that was like honestly like a miniature at first that they just shot from the outside and then they had just like an inside set for.
Yeah, they actually built it, and apparently it was really heavy.
It looks really heavy.
Yeah,
Like you were saying, they go inside and it's empty.
yeah. Of course they go in there, and then obviously they find Newt, and then here's another kind of a bit of trivia for you. So they try and actually grab Newt. That's the only living thing that's in this place because everybody else has been taken away by the aliens, and she bites Hicks on the hand. So, do you know that he has been bit on the hand in every single James Cameron film he's appeared in?
I didn't know that. I knew that what's her name? Linda Hamilton bit him in the first one. He's because he feels pain and Terminators don't.
Yeah, that's right. But apparently you'll be able to remember this better than me. But I'm not a big fan of The Abyss. I watched it a couple of years ago for only like the second or third time and still couldn't get into it. But he's bitten in the hand in that, isn't he?
Yeah, is he bitten in the hand by a human or is he bitten in the hand by a rat? Something bites him in that movie though.
Yeah, I can't remember, but that's the trivia. He's been bitten in the hand in 3 James Cameron movies.
I think Bill Paxton's the other one who's been killed in like 3 James Cameron movies or something like that.
Bill Paxton is the only man to be killed by a predator, a Terminator, and an alien.
Oh, that's what it was.
That's what the meme is. So it is. But yeah, of course, they go in and there's nobody there, and then they eventually suss that they find all this activity down in the whereabouts is it again? Where they find all this activity. So they do. Because they have all these trackers.
They have all the trackers on them, and like that. This is where we get to see all our soldiers in action. What do you think of all the group of soldiers that they assemble?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing is about the characters. I think there's a handful of them, as we said about in the Cuckoo's Nest episode, right? You can distinguish all 9, or if you want to count. Well, there's 9, is there, including Jack Nicholson, but you can distinguish all 9 of them patients, right? As we talked about the other week. The problem I have with some of these Marines, and I suppose there's not too much emphasis on it. You can only distinguish the main ones. Do you know what I'm saying? Like Vasquez. I think everybody's favorite is Vasquez, and everybody remembers Bill Paxton because he's the one with all the bravado, and then turns into a bit of a card. And then you've Michael Biehn, which he's a bit bland, but you remember him because he's Michael Biehn and he was in the Terminator, and he's basically the last one to survive with Sigourney Weaver. But apart from that, I find them very bland. Even Gorman's a bit bland. They're okay. I do like some of the one-liners that some of them have. And of course, you have the Sarge as well. Everybody remembers the Sarge, who was apparently a real drill sergeant. I think he was in Vietnam. And that was part of the reason for him getting that part, because the actual actors who played the Marines, the Space Marines, they went through like a training regime for like 6 weeks, so they would understand what it felt like to be a Marine.
Yeah, he is phenomenal. And actually, I believe he does the voice work, but I don't know if you ever played the video game Halo, but Halo basically ripped off Aliens completely. It's very, very similar. They have Space Marines in that as well. And I think he plays the exact same character, but he's
right
because he's just such a good drill sergeant. You believe him. And then, yeah, Vasquez, like, she's great. It's just always so funny to me. I mean, looking like they would never do this today because she's clearly like doing like brown face. She's not Spanish at all. She's actually Jewish, and she's doing like, I'm like, is she doing a Scarface thing? Is that what's going on? Because I think some of her lines are a little bit like, all right. Because then you see her in Terminator 2, and she pops up again in Titanic, and you're like,
yep.
Okay, that's a white woman.
But she's playing an Irish woman. It's just speaking with an Irish accent in Titanic. Should I take offense at that?
You should take offense, David.
So you're not Irish. You're putting that Irish accent on there. But yeah, look, listen, I love Jeanette. Is it Bernstein you call her or Goldstein? I was calling her Bernstein earlier. Her
I
name's
thought it was
Gold
Weinstein, I think. It might be
Weinstein. Is it
Feinstein.
Gold Weinstein? I don't know. We'll just call her
Uh,
Jeanette.
let's see what the hell it is. Well, I'll get the exact Jeanette Feinstein. Goldstein.
Goldstein. I was calling her Bernstein earlier. Yeah. No, listen, I think she's great in this film as well. And I actually wrote down in my notes here because I love how like they're all so skeptical of Ripley when they first see her. And it's kind of like, who's Snow White over there? I think they call her Snow White. I'm not sure. And they're like, oh, she's a consultant. Apparently, she's seen an alien once. Ooh, whoop de doo, and all this here. And they're all very cynical and sarcastic. But when she starts to tell them, and that's what I love about Sigourney Weaver's character in this movie, I feel as if, unlike Sarah Connor in Terminator 2, where she kind of starts off tough. You can fill in the blanks there with Terminator 2, but obviously, John Connor tells us some of what the Sarah Connor and her were doing in between T1 and T2. So that's fair enough. The way Sarah Connor starts, that's fine. This is a continuation. So it's not like Sigourney Weaver or Ripley starts off tough at the very start. She's still very unsure of herself. She's terrified of these aliens, and she kind of just grows into this heroine as the movie goes on, which I feel is a better characterization for this character. But when she's trying to tell the Marines about what she saw, and they're kind of like, they're very kind of dismissive of her story, and Vasquez is kind of like, I just want to know one thing, where they are. And but I love how like Sigourney Weaver's like, that's you better hope that one doesn't get in because it wiped my career at less than 24 hours, and you see them kind of thinking like, what if she is telling the truth? But I wrote down in my notes, who would win in a fight, Ripley or Vasquez?
I think Ripley. I'm sorry. Like Sigourney Weaver's like Vasquez, I feel like, yeah, she's a badass and she's got the muscle behind her. But I also feel like she's overly confident. Whereas Ripley, she's confident in herself, but she's been through shit and I feel like could back it up. She beat a xenomorph by herself. Everyone else died. I'm sorry. And
Yeah.
Vasquez doesn't make it. Spoiler.
Yeah, well, I think you're right, but I don't think she would have her all her own way. I think it will be one of those situations where I think Vasquez will be getting the better of her at the start, even if she is a lot smaller, she'd be able to get on body a wee bit. But I think as the fight wears on, I think Ripley, because of her size and her endurance, that she would eventually wear Vasquez down and knock her out by the 8th round.
Yeah, I mean, they all learn pretty fast who's the tough guy in the room, and it's definitely and it's not Vasquez. It's Ripley. Like Ripley again has to become the leader, and not only does she become the leader, but she becomes like we touched on Newt a little bit, but she becomes the mother figure to Newt. And we find out at the beginning of this movie she was a mother herself, who's obviously 57 years later that there's no more daughter, but she still has that motherly instinct because, like we said, time for her is not this long, so she just basically found that. So she's still got that mother in her, and the movie itself is supposed to be the tale of two mothers. This mother and then the queen alien mother that we will eventually see at the end of the movie.
Yeah, well, the thing is that obviously when they find Newt and obviously she's scared. She's been living out here in Hayden for weeks, surviving, and that doesn't have much to eat. And it's Gorman's treating Newt, trying to get answers from her as if she's like, a soldier, as if she's been court-martialed and he wants to get answers from her, right? Whereas, like, Ripley being a female, having that effeminate side, being a mother, which I don't know if we've learned that at this stage. That's in the director's cut. I don't think it's in the theatrical cut. However, she knows how to get through to Newt. She knows how to kind of like get answers from her. And of course, when she tells Ripley that her family's dead, which we don't see again in this theatrical cut, we see it in the director's cut how her family find the derelict spaceship from the first movie, and the mother and father go inside, and then the father comes out with a face hugger on his face. But of course, then that leads to them going down into where all the actual colonists are actually being kept, and they're all cocooned. And they have aliens, or well, we assume they have aliens inside them, and that's where our first piece of action comes in the movie, John.
Oh yeah, we get some action right here, and this scene is amazing. Just watching the entire team just honestly get blown away and realize how unmatched they are, which it's almost a little bit. I don't want to say satisfying because how cocky they are, but it's just like proving again, like in the first movie, like why do people doubt Ripley and what she's saying?
Yeah, it's a bit odd because you wonder. I've seen this question asked. I mean, because why would these Marines be so skeptical? Because they assume that this is the future, and these Marines have traveled to other planets and maybe seen other kind of species. You hear them talking about Octurians at the start, where somebody says, um, we've got to rescue some colonists from their virginity, and it was like, oh, you're looking for that Octurian Poontine again? And he says the only thing was yours was male, and he says, well, it doesn't matter when they're Octurian. There's strange dialogue. Which again might actually tie into the subtext, of the movie, where these aliens come from, and mothers and things like that. But so I find it a bit odd that they are very skeptical. But look, that is what it is. They are skeptical, but obviously things start to get real when they go down inside here, and the aliens start actually coming for them. And one thing I have to say is, like, James Cameron is like one of the best directors of action that you'll ever see.
Oh yeah, he's so good at it and building the tension to it to the moment when they finally like where are they to when they finally start attacking.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. And one thing is, did you recognize where they filmed that scene? This scene here where they're in and they find all the colonists cocooned and the aliens come out first.
No, but I remember us discussing with the first alien how that got cut out when they find like the cocoon person. That was an original alien idea, and then they carried it over to aliens.
Yeah, but do you know where they actually filmed this in England? Did you
No.
recognize where it was filmed? No. It's Acton Power Plant, right? Which was Axis Chemicals in Batman. So you take a
Really?
look at all that. Yeah, the exact same place. Take a look at the catwalks, and you can see exact scenes from Batman filmed in the exact same spots. And when Ripley takes control of I think they're called, is it called the AC or AAP? Automated, what's it called? There's a name for that big vehicle we were talking about earlier, but she takes control of that. And she drives in to where they are to rescue them. It's the exact same shot, the low camera angle of that vehicle coming down. It's the same shot where the Batmobile shoots down the door and comes in the Axis Chemicals, and Joker screens are all firing at it.
I can see that now. They must put the camera in the same exact place.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the same place, Acton Power Plant, and as I say, yes, that is an amazing scene, and you can see how an experienced Gorman is there, where like the platoon is actually crumbling down around them. You can see like they're flatlining, and there's pandemonium, and there's been an explosions, and he just doesn't know what to do. The strong Ripley that we come to know, that's when you first see. Yeah, this is the first glimpse we see of her kind of taking command of the whole situation. You know what I mean? And really becoming part of the group, because before then she's more of an outsider. You know what I mean? Just like Gorman's an outsider, but Gorman has just proved that he's worthless. So she's taking more control of the situation, and this is what I like now, because once that scene's over, John, and they kind of like she saves some of the Marines. She's earned their respect now, right? And half of them are gone, taken by the aliens. There's a few of them injured. And of course, we have the famous line now of "Game over, man! Game over!"
Man, it's game over. What the fuck are we gonna do now? What are we gonna do?
Yeah, it's classic. I mean, it's still great, and the shot going on around that is beautiful. I love that with the wind and everything, and like they just look defeated. Like I'm with Bill Paxton. I'm like, yeah, it's game. What do you do from here? And then like they phone in, and it's like, yeah, it's gonna probably be like 17 days. So it's like 17 days.
Do you know what? See, watching this again, we all know like Bill Paxton and Hudson. Everybody loves his cockiness, and you know what I mean, and some of his one-liners, and he's like the bad boy. He's like the school prankster, right? You know what I mean? And but I was watching this the other night. I was going to myself. I was thinking, I don't get his character at all. I don't get it. this guy, how could this guy ever be a soldier? Is this the only time he's seen combat? I mean, I understand you're going up against something that you don't understand and it's scary. I just don't get it. I just don't get how Wayne he is, and yeah, well, I'm used to him by now, but watching it again the other night with a critical eye, I was like, I just don't get this character at all. And of course, later on, we'll get to it when he does start taking a few aliens out. He goes down fighting, and you cheer for him, even though he dies. You cheer for him because of how whiny he was. But I'd prefer if he wasn't a Marine. Then, I mean, I know everybody's only human, and everybody gets scared. But watching it again, I'm like, I don't get it.
Well, what's crazy is that Ripley again is not a trained Marine. She's just a strong human being. How did she end up working for a trucking unit and she's not even in charge? Like, she wasn't even the boss of her ship. Like, she was like third in charge, or it was either second or third in charge on that ship.
Yeah, that's right.
And now she's like leading a group of Marines that are supposedly trained for this, which makes me think the reason why that Bill Paxton character is the way he is that this whole group of people have just gone in and just run roughshod everywhere they go, and they haven't been challenged. And now this is the first time that they actually met something that can take them out. And now he's actually, for the first time, facing death that he's never faced before, and that he reverts back to what he really is, which is a coward.
Yeah. Well, that may well be true. And you did hear him saying later on it. And I read the novelization. I think it's the novelization. Like, he was getting out of the army in like 4 weeks or something. You hear him mention it later on. 4 weeks, man. 4 weeks. We're not going to make it tonight. I could have been out of here in 4 weeks. No. But you're saying about when they go out, one thing you forget, and I always forget this when I'm watching it. I noticed it again the other night. Like, they're carrying Gorman on the stretcher. He's all conscious. They're carrying him out, and then when the actual spacecraft comes down to pick them up, and it's basically like, and then the aliens on board, and they don't realize, and it kills the two pilots, and it crashes. They see it coming down, and they go run. They just drop Gorman. They just leave him there and run for cover. They held with him, and then you see. Then afterwards, while Hudson's having his meltdown of like, game over, man, game over. You can see. I think it's Hicks goes over and lifts like burning foliage off Gorman's legs. Gorman's just lying there, and then it makes me wonder. But like, the next scene is they get back to the main base, and I'm like, well, why didn't they just walk to the main base in the first place? I mean, what do you call her? Newt says, we better go now. They come mostly at night. Mostly, that's another one of the famous lines. And the next scene is they're back in the main complex, because Bishop's there. That's where Bishop is. He's in there studying the face hugger, isn't it? It's just magnificent, isn't it? And it kind of like throws you, because you remember Ice from the first movie, so it kind of
too. Like, you're like, holy shit, is he going to be like that?
Exactly. So they're kind of playing that game. Who's the bad guy here? They're trying to make you think that Paul Reiser is the good guy, and he's got Ripley's interest at heart and just the company's interest at heart, and this is just a mission to go and destroy these and save the colonists. So they're kind of playing that game at the minute. But what I like about these next few scenes, John, to be honest with you, is when we're down to this core group now that have to survive, get out of this particular situation. There's a couple of scenes that follow to kind of build relationships, and you first have like the Hicks and Ripley scene, and they're kind of flirting with each other. You see, like, there's a wee bit of a connection going on there between them two, and these scenes kind of flesh out the characters a wee bit more, in my opinion. The next scene you have like is Ripley with Newt, and when she's putting her to bed, and I love how Ripley says to Newt about I think Newt says something about being scared, and she says about her doll, she's not scared, and she says, well, she's not scared because she's a piece of plastic. But did you notice that when she's lying on the bed, when she brings her into that bed to put her to sleep, it's kind of like there's an orange glow on their faces. And
I was gonna say this, like Alien 3.
Yeah, but more kind of saying that the rest of the movie is kind of blue and cold, not metallic blue, which Cameron likes in all of his movies, but it's kind of almost trying to tell us something else about these two characters and their relationship. That there's a warmth between them.
Yeah, and there is, and honestly, you love that driving force. I love seeing, honestly, Ripley play mom in these moments. She's so good at it, and I mean, she's doing it through the whole movie anyway. She's basically playing mom to these guys who are supposed to be men. She's the most powerful person in these movies.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, then you have there's the scene then with Ripley and Bishop as well, where they're asking about where do these eggs come from? Who's laying these eggs? So now we're setting up the other subplot of, we know from the first movie that there's thousands of eggs, right? We know what happens when a facehugger gets on a victim, lays an egg inside them, and we know what comes of that. Now the question is being asked, where do the eggs come from? And then she goes on then to have a conversation with Burke where she catches on to him about his motivations behind why he's there. And as I said before, whereas like the audience is suspect of Bishop, we now kind of start to realize, no, this is the human this time. It's Burke. He's the one that's going to try and fuck them over.
Yep, exactly. It's basically just exactly doing a reverse of that. And again, that's one thing where Alien ties it to Aliens. And then once we get closer to the ending and the actual ending, it really is the exact same ending as Alien, just in a much, 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 much bigger format.
100%, and that's exactly my point I was making earlier in the podcast. Is that listen, I love the ending of this movie. But
there's something in this ending of this movie that it's so badass. It's incredible.
Yeah, but it is a retread of the original Alien. First of all, I want to say that Ripley's a hypocrite. First of all, because when the Sarge and Dietrich were taken by the aliens, and was it Vasquez says she sees they're not flatlined, and she says we got to go back and get the Sarge and Dietrich. They're still alive. We don't leave anybody behind. And Ripley says, you can't help them now. They're being cocooned like the rest of them. We need to get out of here. Yet when Newt is taken, she's like, I got to get her, Bishop. I know she's still alive. And I was like, oh, you hypocrite.
She is a hypocrite, but she's thinking with that mother mentality.
That is true. That is very true, and that's fair enough. And we understand that. And as I said, yeah, I totally agree with you that the ending replicates the original Alien. So Newt is basically Jonesy.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, as Newt goes throughout the movie, that's kind of what she is. She doesn't speak very much. She's kind of along for the ride. She's cute. She really is just Jonesy. Like, she's just there, kind of with her. And they do the exact same. They actually did Jonesy better in this movie than what they do to Newt in Alien 3. So
yeah, well, let's say about that the batters, John, and not only that as well, we also have in this movie, instead of like the Nostromo exploding, it's a planet exploding. So when she goes back to get Newt, it's a race against time. They kind of like rescue Newt before the planet explodes rather than the Nostromo. And then you also have the false ending as well, of where you think that everything is destroyed and everything's okay, only for the alien to appear. But they up the stakes because it's not just one alien; it's a fucking massive queen alien. You know what I mean? Which is more scarier and more vicious and more deadly.
When we get the reveal of her and she takes Bishop and rips him in fucking half, like, that is one of my favorite shots in the movie. And just throws him about. And of course, again, that's a callback to the original Alien, how he's just in half, but he's still able to communicate and everything. But I just love, I can't believe that that effect is amazing.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. But first of all, just come back a wee bit there as well. Of course, when she does go in to rescue Newt, and she puts the flamethrower on all the eggs and everything, and then I just feel as if this is the point of the movie. This is what I'm saying about how you view movies as you get older, and certain movies endure or get better with the age, or they don't. And the one thing that I have with this movie is that I know they changed the concept of the aliens, that these are worker aliens. It's just how easily the aliens are being taken out left, right, and center. I mean, the first alien was like supposed to be indestructible, nothing could stop it. You know what I mean? And in this one here, they're almost made out of the same stuff ET's made out of. They're being hit with these weapons and they're just exploding. And it's just more like the acids you got to be more afraid of than the aliens.
that's a big reason why I value Alien over Aliens more too. It's like you devalued essentially what an alien is. Now you're like, oh well, if they just had better guns, they could kill them easier.
Yeah, and the thing is too is that then when the alien, I know the alien queen is giving birth, but when Ripley's in there and she starts putting putting the eggs on fire, it's the alien queen. She's a bit useless, like she's just a sitting duck.
Yeah, I think that's because of having to probably the way they had to maneuver that thing is like, unfortunately, that was probably something they had to work around. If I had to guess, at least.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say as well is just about Gorman. As what I forgot to mention Gorman. All I have to say is that he redeems himself. There's a bit of redemption there for Gorman.
We'll give him a slight pass, I guess.
Yeah, give us a pass. Yeah, but I honestly think that if Gorman and Vasquez made it out of there, they might become an item. No,
Maybe.
yeah, I think so.
I don't know. I feel like their personalities will clash. It's a little too much as time goes on. She'll get sick of him.
But yes, getting back to what you're saying, that effect of Bishop. When I remember first watching that scene, it actually reminds me a lot of Quint out of Jaws when he's getting the coming out of his mouth. It's almost like Cameron wants to upstage that.
Well, he does do things like that earlier in the movie when we first are in the boardroom. That's a shot right out of 2001 Space Odyssey. The way that whole thing is set up, like that's the exact same setup and camera angles as everything is that.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize. I only watched 2001 a few years ago, and there's music in that, which is in Aliens in the score, and I didn't realize it was an original type of classical or score. I can't even remember which one it is, John. But I remember watching 2001, and I knew maybe 2001 came out in the 60s, but I remember thinking, Aliens, because that's the only place I'd heard that music was in Aliens. So of course, James Cameron, like a lot of filmmakers of that period, were heavily influenced by Stanley Kubrick and 2001. I mean, Ridley Scott was, Scorsese was, Spielberg was. They all were. I think even your mom was, with Freaking. They're all influenced by that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you're making a sci-fi movie, it's like, well, what are we going to take from 2001 for this?
Yeah, exactly. And it was almost like when Lucas made Star Wars, it was almost like this is my 2001. Do you know what I mean? Spielberg makes Close Encounters. This is my 2001. It's the same with Ridley Scott and Alien, and then James Cameron with Aliens. They all want to do some kind of sci-fi movie and set in space. And but when the tail first goes through Bishop and you see his stomach expand, when I first seen this, I thought it was a face hugger. Or a chest burster coming out of him.
Yeah, I can see that. I didn't think of that, but it does look exactly the same. Their face reactions look exactly the same as if it was a face hugger. I mean, stomach burster.
Sorry, I said somebody knows me. Yeah, but I always laugh. But to be honest with you, I do laugh that when it lifts him up, you see him, he kind of grabs Ripley and he's going, and all the milk's flying out. And she kind of actually pulls his arm off. Don't blame her. And but I love how if you watch it, there's a launch shot and it kind of the alien queen kind of grabs him, and you can see the hands on him and just kind of pulls him. And you see him just pull apart, and the effect is still great to this day. And I actually laugh. But I see that, I actually laugh. I think it's class. I think it's because he's a robot type of thing, and he just kind of goes, oh.
It's like it's so unexpected, like how easy it is to just kill him like that, and like he's not even dead. That's what's crazy. He's on the floor, just like moving, just like from the first one, just like, oh man, you're messed up.
Yeah, he's fucked, and of course then that leads to the scene with the what do you call it? You call that thing there the power loader.
Power loader thing, which they set up right in the beginning of the movie perfectly. Which I mean, even if you only saw the movie for the first time, like that's the most obvious foreshadowing in film.
Yeah, it is. Where do you want it?
Bay 12, please.
That's right. Is there anything you can do? I do like that. We seen anyway. She goes, "Where do you want it?" Anyway, so yeah, and look, I think I mentioned in one of our podcasts before, John. I hate the word iconic because it is misused. It's overused. I hate the word masterpiece. It's misused. It's overused. But that scene with the power loader and the alien queen, that is iconic. And with an iconic opening line of "Get away from her, you bitch."
Yep. And you know what's funny is I don't know if you saw this, but Sigourney Weaver was not happy with that line reading when she did it the first time, but that was the only time they did it. So they stuck with it.
Why did she not like it? Because she was cursing?
No, because she said she went up too high. She said she was going up. She was like going up to bitch when she meant to originally go down. So she screwed up the line reading and she's like, okay, I'll just do it on the next ones. But then she said James Cameron loved it so much they didn't need to do it again. And she's like,
yeah, no, listen, it's an iconic scene and it's an iconic line. It's brilliant. And it's great that she, she's in this power loader, but she's able to go hand-to-hand combat with this alien queen, which is like, I don't know, 9 feet tall or whatever, maybe bigger. And they fade it out, and it's brilliant. It's brilliantly shot. The puppet looks amazing. I know they use miniatures as well. And yeah, it's a more, like the first movie, again, this is kind of like, rather than Ripley running and hiding, and then coming out and opening the airlock, and then hitting it with a spear gun, knocking it out the airlock. This time she fully confronts it, and it's almost like a wrestling match or a boxing fight at the end of the movie. But again, just reflecting the first movie, she ends up blowing it out the airlock.
Yep, exactly, just like the first movie. We get the exact same ending as the first movie.
Yeah, and I love how Bishop's kind of like blowing along, the floor, the grated floor, and he's like, whoa, whoa, and then he hangs on, and of course he becomes the hero as well because he ends up grabbing Newt before she's sucked out the airlock, and she shouts like Bishop, and he grabs her. But look, again, I think that if that alien queen can't hold on, although isn't she holding on to her foot? I can't remember. If that alien queen can't hold on and stay in there, then there's no way Ripley's holding on. Ripley is getting blown out that airlock. Either that or her arm is getting pulled out of her socket and she's being sucked out. But sure, it's only a movie.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we're not supposed to believe everything. I mean, they're fighting aliens.
It's space.
Yeah.
Well, one of the final things that I just want to say as well, of course, when she defeats the alien and stuff, I don't know if you notice this because it's very subtle. When she gets in, Newt gets up and runs over to Ripley and she calls her mummy.
Yes, I did notice that, and I've always noticed that, and I'm like, okay, I get it. Do you think it's a little too soon?
I think it's a little too soon. It's a bit weird, but I understand in the context of the movie. This again ties into the whole kind of subplot of the movie of Ripley losing her daughter because she came back 57 years later. Turns out that her daughter died of cancer, was an old woman and died of cancer. And so she's basically grieving the loss of her daughter. And here's Newt, who is grieving the loss of her mum and dad and her brother. And then they become like surrogate mother and daughter. And that's why she's so protective of Newt. And that's why she feels like she has to protect her in the way she does. And I suppose that's Damon's telling the audience at the end that, this is not where this relationship ends until you get the Alien 3, of course.
Yeah, which is incredible because Aliens, becomes a phenomenon just like the original Alien. And of course, people will always start asking the question, we've just gotten Aliens. Are we going to get an Alien 3? Because people are happy at the very end of the movie. Not only does Sigourney Weaver survive, but so does Hicks. And then, of course, so does Newt. Everyone's excited. People like Hicks. Like you said, he's a little flat. You kind of forget he's there. Then we get Alien 3, directed by David Fincher, and what happened? Oh, they all died except for Sigourney Weaver.
I know. It's a bummer. It is a bummer, and I love how as well. I do really love how the movie ends. How again that this one here isn't as we said about the whole ending, kind of like it's like a rerun of the original movie, only on steroids, right? But they also do the ending, whereas like rather than Ripley lying in her pod. I can't remember what you call that, where she's going to sleep with Jonesy the cat. They now have the two pods beside each other, and it's like how the Newt and Ripley's face are framed in the exact same position, in the exact same way. Very, very reminiscent of each other, beside each other there, and I like that, and I like how that's a freeze frame, and then it goes into the music at the end of the movie. I love that music at the very very end. It's very somber, but it fits it perfectly.
It does, and it wraps up a fantastic 1980s film, and follows up Alien, and I love the movie. I really do. I think we were talking like I still would put this as James Cameron's third best film behind only the first two Terminator movies, and then I think you feel a little bit higher on Titanic than I do, and I feel a little bit higher than The Abyss than you do. But we can agree that Aliens is fantastic.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's a fantastic movie. It's a fantastic sequel. For me, like rankings, when I was watching it the other night, over the years, like as I've said earlier, you view things differently, and sometimes your tastes change, and there's films that stick with you, and there's other ones that don't, and there's movies that date, and there's other ones that don't. And I was getting the feeling that maybe T2 was kind of sliding down on the Cameron list for me. For many years, Terminator 1 was my favourite movie of his, just for the rawness of it, the grittiness and the rawness of it. I don't think it's his best polished film. Definitely not.
No.
Yeah, far from it. But I think for me, it's just my favourite film of his. But no, after watching this again the other night, I think that Terminator 2 would have to be number 2 for me. And I don't know which is better, Titanic or Aliens. I honestly don't know. I mean, maybe nearly have them as a tie. It depends. But there's times I might feel Titanic is higher than Aliens, and there's other times that I feel maybe Aliens is higher than Titanic. But one thing I did actually think about, John, is that as time has went on over the years, I actually I like Alien more as time has went on. I'm liking it more and more as time goes on, and I'm liking Aliens less and less. That's not me saying that it's a bad film or anything. I just don't enjoy it as much as I used to when I was younger. Whereas like I'm enjoying Alien more.
I actually 100% agree with you. Alien, every time I watch it, moves up my list, and every time I watch Aliens, I think the same thing. Like, that's really good. But I think of even like 1980s films, I'm like, I still wouldn't put it above this movie, like gun to my head. I'm going to rewatch all these movies. Whereas I watch Aliens, I'm like, that's a good movie. You watch it every like couple of winters, but the original Alien, I'm like, I'm going to watch that every year, and I'm going to have an absolute blast with it.
Yeah. The thing is that, as we said earlier, I find as if as well, I do something now that I've seen it a lot of times, I do find maybe that first hour to be a bit, I don't want to say slow, but I feel as if it takes a while for it to get going. That's the issue I have with this movie as well. I feel as if it does just take a wee bit too long to get going.
A lot of exposition up front for a movie that, it's trimmed down already, and it's still about 2.5 hours long. So that's a little bit rough.
Yeah, exactly. But look, as I say, I don't want to end on a downer either, mate, because listen, it's still a superb sequel. It's still one of the best sequels of all time. It's still one of the best follow-ups to a classic movie, a masterpiece like Alien. It's still one of the best follow-ups to a classic movie that's ever been made. And look, people will say that Aliens is a classic in itself and it's a masterpiece in itself. I suppose I do tend to agree. I agree with that. I just, as I say, maybe it's just me being older, that it's just not as high on my, if I was to rank my movies as much as it would have been maybe say 10 years ago or 15 years ago. As I said, when you're a kid, that was probably your favorite, but now that you're older, you go, no, Alien's my favorite,
I do think though, without Aliens, we wouldn't have the franchise that we have now. I don't think without, because like if they would have just had Alien and kind of kept trying to go with another film like in similar vein, we don't end up with all the horrible sequels that we would have gotten now, in my opinion.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. But look, they could have took the easy way out and just tried to make a complete carbon copy of the original Alien. And you're right. I mean, it would be like the Friday the 13th. As much as I love them, it's the same movie over and over again. It basically is just the same movie over and over and over again. And you're right. They could have went that way with Alien. With James Cameron in charge, like I said earlier, they were able to expand the universe and up the ante and make it a wee bit more action packed. So to keep the audience invested. In a lot of ways, it is to his detriment too. Do you not think? Because it's hard to top. When you have two brilliant movies like that, once you go to a third, it's hard to top.
Oh, they've never.
It's the same with Terminator.
Yeah, no, exactly the same. They're honestly sister franchises in that sense because they've been chasing the glory of Alien and Aliens and Terminator 1 and 2 forever. And in my opinion, like Alien Romulus, I thought was a little better than you thought it was, but I didn't think it was anything special. And they're chasing like, oh, it's all you'll ever hear every time one of those sequels come out is it's the best one since Terminator 2 or it's the best one since Aliens. It's like, but we'll never be able to capture that again.
Yeah, and look, it's not even like it's not like I'm looking for something to beat Alien or Aliens. It's going to be very hard. I think what I'm just looking for is a quality movie, and unfortunately, I just don't think we've got anything in the region of the quality of Alien or Aliens ever since Aliens. It's the same with the Terminator franchise. There's been nothing in that region in the quality of those first two movies. Although, but in saying that, the problem I have with Terminator 2 is that they try to keep continuing the story, whereas I think the story ended at the end of T2, and if they want to tell a story, then they should tell an alternate story, timeline story to do with the future war. I think we discussed that on our Terminator episode. Whereas this Alien franchise to me has a lot of potential. I think I'm fed up seeing Ripley-like characters. I think there's other directions they can go. Okay, people might say that's the heart of the franchise, but I don't know. There's a whole vast world to kind of to explore, I think, in the Alien universe, and that's why I say is Aliens a detriment to the franchise? Because what happened was that you had Cameron take it in an action direction rather than stay in the lane of a slow burn horror movie. Would you have got better sequels after Alien 2 if they had stayed in that lane?
That's a good point. I never thought about that. Would the quality have increased? Yeah, I mean that is a great point. I don't know though, just because it sounds like 20th Century Fox, even with this movie, they could have fumbled it hard if they had somebody like didn't have James Cameron. I think David Fincher just had no power that his voice couldn't reach that, 20th Century Fox was going to make their movie and they just saw David Fincher as a chess piece to move around to make the movie they wanted to make, and that's why we end up with a so-so sequel.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, and I think the problem with Alien 3 is, and I suppose we could do it sometime, is that he tried to bring it back to what the original movie was. Okay, which I'm not saying that if they had made the second one more in vein of the first one, that the franchise would have lived longer, or could have lived longer. That was what I was saying. It could have lived longer, but I'm not. But Fincher tried to bring it back to that, and it didn't work because it's very pale in comparison to Aliens, right? Maybe if they had subtly brought it back to that, because like you say, the biggest crime he committed was killing off all those characters that Ripley saved at the end of the second movie, and then it also makes the second movie feel pointless and worthless.
Yeah, they kind of did that with Terminator 2 and Terminator Dark Fate, essentially, where you undo it, or like even in the more recent Star Wars trilogy of movies, where they try and undo what we saw in the last movie. That's just kind of spitting in the fans' faces of those movies. Like with Aliens 2, like people love Aliens. People love those characters. They love Newt, and to just kill them off screen, and they're like, yeah, you're banking on them loving Sigourney Weaver, and you got Sigourney Weaver back, and you want to sell this movie in this way, so you have to get there some way. But when you do something like that, I don't think that's the right path to go.
Yeah, I think, if we deep dive more in the Alien 3, I think that was a gamble by the director at the time, which he thought he was making the right decision, but ultimately it was the wrong decision. And as I said earlier there, John, I think that if they wanted to bring it back to the slow burn of the original, they should have slowly done it in a gradual way rather than have this, because it just feels like a steep just fall off. When you go watch Aliens, then watch Alien 3 back to back, it's just a steep fall off. And it's not what people were expecting. The audience loved Aliens that much that I'm not saying they should have made another Aliens, because I think that's a mistake. But what I'm saying is nothing wrong with having a bit of action in there, maybe having a bit of a slow burn, but I felt as if how they actually went about it was basically the problem. So, yeah.
I completely agree. I think that's where the flaws were, but it doesn't take anything away from the film Aliens. And I think we covered everything we need to cover on this classic film of the 1980s. But David, What are we going to be reviewing next here on the channel?
Next on the channel, me and John are gonna go on a heist job in Reservoir Dogs.
One of my favorite movies of all time, and I've been itching to watch this one too, so I'm excited about this.
Yeah, me too. It's been a few years since I've watched Reservoir Dogs, John, and I felt as if we haven't done a Tarantino film yet. We need to do a Tarantino film, and why not start at the start?
Yeah, hey, it works for me. It's still my second favorite Tarantino film. He's my favorite director, so I'm excited to talk about him here on the show. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it here for us on another episode of the Let's Talk Movie podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed the show. And if you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends about us, and we'll see you on the next episode. Hey guys, just popping in at the end of me and David's review of Aliens for this week's Digital Code Giveaway. In every single video that we do here on Friday, I ask you guys 2 Digital Code Giveaway questions. As long as you answer one of those questions in the comments section, you guys come back to Tuesday's video where I'll put your name on a magic wheel, and the 2 names it lands on, they have their choice of the digital codes that you've seen on your screen before you today. And this week I'm going to ask you guys, what is your favorite James Cameron film? And what is your favorite Alien film? Now, that doesn't mean an Alien franchise film, just any film out there that features an alien of some sort. So that includes like The Thing or Mars Attacks, any of those movies. So leave your answers in the comment section. Then don't forget to come back to this Tuesday's video to see if you're one of our lucky winners. And guys, we hope you enjoyed me and David's show. So if you did, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this video if you could. We also have channel membership. So if you want to become a friend of the channel, a producer for the channel like John Doe Juggalo, or even a channel director like Kevin Kruger, and then even if you want to go higher than that and become a bankroller like Frank from Frank's Media Reviews and Mr. Smelly Potato, you guys can look for all that information and all those perks in the description below. But if you got no money to throw away, guys, don't worry about it. We just hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, get out in those streets, tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.